strict instructions tonight. I am not to stray from the podium. And when you're an Italian kid in New York City, born and raised, you kind of walk around a bit, you use your hands, you do all of those kind of things, but I need to stay stationary because we are recording for posterity here, and I appreciate that very much. Many of you have probably heard about DeMolay. It's a boys' organization, 12 to 21. It is worldwide. About 150,000 boys are in it, currently active under the age of 21. This is not counting the amount of volunteer advisors and everyone else that come along with this. We're on every continent. We are starting up in new countries faster than I can get there. We are bridging barriers of language. Somebody would say you're bridging the money issues. Well, when it comes to doing the right things, money usually follows for children and for kids. And that happens in America as well. But the Order of DeMolay is approaching its 100th anniversary in 2 years. And when you think about it, 100 years, you know, we're used to hearing those things in Masonry. We have lodges that are 150 years. We have lodges that are here before America was here. We had provincial Grand Masters before there was such a thing as Grand Masters. We have 250-year-old lodges. We have celebrated 300 years in England in September, October with a big event. Yet how many other things do you hear about that hit those milestones? Houses of worship, stores, Sears. Who ever heard of Sears having trouble? Sears was the staple of everything, and now they have an issue. Yet here's an organization for young men that has subsisted for 98 years. And in those 98 years, it has astronauts, governors, it has soldiers, citizens, plumbers, electricians, people who have come back and given to society in some way. And if anybody's needed a plumber, you know that when they come to your house to help you, they are giving back to society. So it's not just politicians, it is those who learn a trade, it is those who learn different things. DeMolay started with a man called Frank Land in 1919 with 9 orphan boys, which soon grew because he felt there was something that they needed to do. You can't see me behind there, can you? Okay. And it then grew from there, and it grew exponentially. It started in Kansas City, Missouri. At that time, Frank Land was a personal friend of Harry Truman, and it was a time when friends of the presidents stopped by to play poker and to do other events. And I met a man in Washington, D.C. about 2 months ago. He's in his late 80s. And he remembers Frank Land coming into Washington, D.C. And the president was there. And there was an honor guard given for the president with DeMolay boys. And the boys were more excited to see Frank Land than they were to see the president of the United States. And he remembers that as a boy. And he also remembers, though, when the president was leaving, he pulls Frank over and he says, don't forget, we have poker tonight at 11 o'clock over at the White House. And that's when he went over and would play poker with him. And that was a different time. You know, security was different. Other things were different. But that's the kind of an individual that started this organization. And later on, as it began, it became apparent that we need to explain to these young men, what is this thing called DeMolay? Why is it called DeMolay? Now, the boys at the beginning picked this name. But the real history of it was really not put out until later on when we had a thing called ritual upon the induction ceremonies. And the first induction ceremony, for those of you who are Masons, you know that we have induction ceremonies that are a lot of talking, a lot of walking, a lot of talking, a lot of walking. We're walking, we're stopped, a lot of talking, and we do that. We also have a drama. And much like Masonry, the drama depicts some of history. And the history that we show is the trial of Jacques DeMolay. And it's put on by boys. DeMolay boys are the ones who do the parts. We recently did one in Utica in March 11. We had 22 young men join DeMolay there. We had boys from all over the country that came to be participating in this. And we put on the DeMolay degree drama. And it starts off just like it would be in the Inquisitions of over 700 years ago. Candlelit room. A individual crawling out, lighting the candles. Kind of types of things you might see in some of the movie channel things. The inquisitors walking in, holding up their scrolls, reading the charges, and then say, bring in those who are charged. And who are those charged? Jacques DeMolay, Hugh de Peral, Godfrey de Gamble, Geoffrey de Charnay are the four that are involved in this particular trial. There were a lot more that were involved in these trials, but our DeMolay degrees emulate these four individuals. And basically what the inquisitors are saying is you guys are in charge of the Templars. Why don't you tell us who everybody is? And DeMolay says, no, I'm not going to. I said, come on, tell us what you got. See, if I was an Italian guy in the 700s, I'd say, come on, tell me what you got. But no, it was a little bit rougher the way they told me. The Master Inquisitor puts jewels on him, puts gold in front of him. Jacques DeMolay throws it back and says he will not sell his soul for something like this. And at which point, they take him out to the rack, they bring him back in, drop him on the floor, and they ask him again. And he says, with my dying breath, I say no. And then they're all taken out. And history tells us that they were burned on a stake on an island near the cathedral. Well, Philip the Fair of France watched from his castle window. One of the funny things is as you do a little bit of research on the internet, you come up with different things. You come up with that he died on March 18th. And March 18th for DeMolay is a big day. We have our Legion of Honor ceremonies that day, where we break bread with another member of the Legion of Honor. The Knights Templar was 2 centuries old by the time Jacques DeMolay was there. Began in 1129. Jacques DeMolay was born in 1243 and was the 23rd and the last Grand Master of the Knights Templar. That plus the fact that the Knights Templars were amassing a tremendous amount of money. We need a seat? We got a seat. There are plenty of seats. That because of the fact that the Knights Templars were amassing a tremendous amount of money, they became something that people wanted to join and be part of. Not only that, they have these nice white robes with the Maltese cross on them, and it is said that people were drawn to that to be part of that order. We've all seen the movie National Treasure, and we've seen the other ones where and when the movie came out, we were assured that there was no money buried underneath this building. But it is said that there was treasures gathered by the Knights Templar. And it's a good historical story for somebody to follow. And those who are in power, whether it be the king or the pope, wanted some of that money and then obviously wanted to get rid of the Knights Templar. So they managed to do that. And the Knights Templars began to lend money. And by lending money, they expected to be paid back. Fortunately, the pope and the king had no plans of paying it back. And their idea of paying it back was torture and all these other things that go on in those days. You know, you fast forward to the fact that he was burned on an island near the cathedral. But one of the things that comes out is that DeMolay put a curse on King Philip, his descendants, Pope Clement V, and everyone else who supported his death. And it is said that within a year and a day, Clement V and Philip IV would die, and also Philip's bloodline would reign in France no more. All of those things came true. I have asked if any of those powers are transmitted to me as Grand Master, and they said no. So all I get is a Metro card and an easy pass for the tolls. I don't get anything else that I can use to get anybody to do more things. But prior to all of this, there's some notes that I have here from a play that I saw, reenacted by Scottish Rite, just last weekend in New Hampshire. And it was a play that was a reenactment of documents taken directly from the Chinon parchments that we have on display here. Catherine, we have them over here?
Yes.
And these aren't everywhere, by the way. This library is one of the few that has that copy. And in it, that plate talks about and takes it direct right out of history as written in those parchments. What happened prior to this trial. And some of it here is written out, and I'm just going to take it verbatim because I got a copy of the manuscript of what they said that day. They asked us not to record it because they're still refining it, but the verbiage I have here. And the document within the Chinon parchment, the Vatican maintains an original copy of the parchment, reference D218. But as it goes on, it is bringing Jacques DeMolay and many of the other members of the Knights Templar on trial. And at that time, Pope Clement had received word by mouth that many reports of King Philip of France and his prelates, his dukes, his barons, and other subjects were part of the kingdom and reported consistent infamy of the Templar Order against the Catholic Church. At which point, they wanted to bring in the Templar leaders to then bring them on trial and judge them. And what they did is they brought them in, many that they brought in, but just a few of them were noted in this particular play as they got close to the end. And they also had, as indicated in the scribes of what's in this Chinon parchment, a notary public, trustworthy witnesses, I guess that's in the eye of the beholder, scribes that took down word for word the proceedings. Now, word for word of the proceedings, you got to figure that's pretty much on target. And what they did is they asked for those to come in to make sure they were separated. They brought in one Templar at a time to ask them questions. Sort of like what they probably do now in investigating. They were doing it then as well. And they brought him in, and they would ask him different questions. They asked him, Brother Raymond de Chinon was one of the Templars that was brought in. Asked when he was initiated into the order. He said 43 years thereabouts, by a brother Roncelin de Fosse. They asked what kind of an initiation it was. He told them what it was. They asked him if he had sinned in any way. And some of the sins that they cited were sodomy, kissing another brother, spitting on the cross. And what he did say was, he said, I did kiss Roncelin de Fosse, but he kissed me out of respect for joining the order, and there was nothing else that came from that. As far as spitting on the cross, they wanted them to spit on the cross. He said he would not. He spit to the side of the cross. Then they asked more questions of him. How old were you when you became a brother of the organization? He says about 17. What do you know about any worshipped heads? He says, I know nothing. Have you ever seen another brother kiss another? Is when he talked about Rensselaer. Have you ever confessed due to a request to avoid torture? Or are you just giving this information to avoid penalty? He says, no, I am not. Then they take him to an altar, put his hands in the Bible, and he swears to these documents. Then they bring in Jacques DeMolay. They make him take an oath of office. They put his hand on the Bible. He says, I speak my name in full, take the solemn oath that I will speak the pure and complete truth about myself, as well as individuals and brothers of the order, and about the order itself, concerning questions of the Catholic faith, and the rule of said order, and also about 5 particular individuals and the brothers of the order. So help me God, and keep me steadfast, I solemnly swear. Some of this sounds familiar to what we have today. They say, Grand Master, when were you initiated into the order? He said, I was initiated 42 years ago by Brother Hubert de Perrault. They say the same questions that they asked him. He says no to all of them, including having anybody kiss him. He says he maintains what he says is true, goes back to the altar, takes a vow that everything is true, and then at the end it is concluded by these cardinals that we extend the mercy and absolution for these acts to Brother Jacques DeMolay, the Grand Master of the said order, who in the form and manner described above had denounced in our presence and described in any other heresy and sworn in person on the Lord's holy gospel, and humbly asked the mercy of absolution, restoring him to the unity within the church and reinstating him communion of the faithful, and sacraments of the church. So then you say, hey, that's all good, but why did they take him out in the back and burn him? You know, what's the story? Well, you know, what the cardinals found and what the king felt should happen were two different things. And it wasn't until a woman named Barbara Fraley, who was an Italian paleographer, was going through files in the Vatican, found these documents that were misfiled 700 years ago, that this all came to light. Pope Benedict eventually went on record absolving the Templars of any wrongdoing of all those centuries ago and apologized. So the history lesson that we have, and by the way, history is what we can find by the written word given to us. Anything before the internet, who knows if there was history, some people say. But yes, there was history before the internet. There was history when people wrote things down. And you have to depend upon that, because the word of mouth is what's handed down. The word of mouth is handed down in the lodge room from one end to the other. By the time it gets to the other, it's different. So you have to depend on what is the written word. And the written word in the Chinon parchments are pretty revealing of what happened. And that adds a little bit more clarity to another part of Jacques DeMolay's life that a lot of people didn't know, including myself. And even on the Grand Master of DeMolay, I'm not really a historian on DeMolay. I do know some facts of why we revere his memory in DeMolay, and it's because of the trust that he had reposed in his brethren, the fact that he would not reveal his brethren, the fact that he stood up for what he felt was right, and the fact that he wanted to make sure that to his death, he did what he felt was correct for his order. I don't know about putting curses on people, but I guess when you're on your way to have your last breath, you might say a few things that you don't realize you're going to say. Somebody apparently was there and wrote that down. But history, thanks to libraries like this, contain these kind of documents, and we can go back and we can refer to it. And then Scottish Rite members and other ones who want to put on plays and bring this stuff forward. So now we fast forward, and when we have an organization called DeMolay. We have an organization that has a kind of funny name. It isn't DeMolay Scouts. It isn't DeMolay Explorers. It's just DeMolay. And we now have people who've joined it, and they start to learn what it means, not so much because of the history of what we've taught them, but about what they learn when they are in it with their other individuals as young men and their adult leaders. And that is to be trustworthy, have love of God, love of home, and love of country. Three basic contents that are the basics of everything we do. And then in Masonry, we take it and we expand on that. In DeMolay, we take it and expand on that. And then we try and make sure that we instill in these young men what DeMolay really does for an individual as individuals go in today's society. Now everybody says today, you know what, kids are just, they're a mess, they're no good. I kind of think my father might have said that about me a couple of times too, when I was a young boy. And a couple of people here like John Gore, who's much older than I am, when he was young, he might have heard the same thing said about him. And you know, it's all in the eye of the beholder of what a child is that's a mess, or what a kid is that's a mess. But in every situation that we have in the recorded history that I've been involved in, especially with DeMolay, any boy or any youth that doesn't have an adult that they can partner with, have someone listen to, or work with, could wind up being a mess at some point, have a harder time assimilating into what they want to do. And in DeMolay, we provide those adults. We provide them, and they don't always have to be Masons as well, even though most of them do become Masons. We have moms that are advisors, because we have a lot of single moms in today's world that step up to do this. And in every individual case, we have adults that are there to provide guidance and some kind of leadership role for them. So what we've done is we've taken some of the tenets of the Knight Templar, which is really honor, code, some of the things you hear in the Marines and in the military services. And then we've inculcated some of them into what we have in our young men today. And we have men that are bonded together, that know who they were who they had in their DeMolay chapter, but can't remember who they had sitting next to them in high school. They know who's in their DeMolay chapter, but maybe remembers who they went to college with. We probably know who we were in the military with because we did some harder things. But there's something about the DeMolay experience that we teach people, and Masonry as well. We know a lot of Masons in dark and light. But when you start this as a young child, and we instill in them the purposes of what DeMolay can bring, we then have individuals that can grow up and be better people for society. This June, DeMolay International is having its session in Buffalo, New York. Probably about 1,000 people come from all over the world. We have a Hall of Fame that we have an induction for. And a Hall of Fame, who's in it? We have governors that are in it, owner of the San Diego Chargers, the blonde guy in Chips. Everybody knows Eric Estrada, nobody knows him. Who knows him? Anybody? Anybody who knows him gets a free glass of wine. He is a senior DeMolay, he's in our Hall of Fame. We have people who are involved with the Super Bowl. This year we are inducting a soldier into the Hall of Fame. He's a friend of mine. He was assigned to protect, with other individuals, a general in Afghanistan. And everything was going well. They're out on patrol, they come back, they go on to the safe side. And the safe part of where you are is where you can take your helmet off. You can start unstrapping some of the Kevlar. One of the Iraqi friendlies turned and started to fire on the general and killed him. This particular soldier jumped in front of the barrage of bullets, took 10 of them, and managed to pull out his weapon and pull off a round and neutralize the insurgent. And all he remembers is trying to find a place in the corner to go and die. And as it turns out, the medics were able to bring him some field expedient surgery. Now, the funny part about it is, the Surgeon General of the Air Force is a senior DeMolay and created and taught medics how to do field surgery, because he said they need to do more than just bandages, tourniquets, and other very basic things. He taught him how to do that. He's also in our Hall of Fame, but he couldn't tell us where he was because he was on the ISIS hit list. So he had to Skype himself in. So it was interesting. When you talk about his life story, it was General so-and-so was born in Ant, can't tell you. His family lives in Ant, we can't tell you. He went to school at Ant, sorry, can't tell you. So the whole thing was nothing but, nothing but black marks all over the place. And then he came in and he said, I can't be there because if I was, your lives would be in danger. And as it turns out, his technique saved this soldier's life. And the soldier now has finally finished a number of surgeries. And he is going to be the one that we are inducting into our Hall of Fame this June. Not a senator, not a San Diego Charger, not a billionaire, not a movie star. A man who said, I'm going to sign a piece of paper that says, I'll give all, including my life. And he almost did. So these are the individuals that are coming back through society that consistently, by the way, does everybody know Dallas Green, the owner that just passed away? He was a senior DeMolay as well. And he has documented many times that DeMolay has supported his ability to do well in life. But this individual, as well as others, have come back to our organization and have come back to our lodges and come back to our masonry and have come back to our communities and given back because they have found the basics that DeMolay has given them when they first started. I'm a salesman. I can sell stuff like you wouldn't believe, but I can only sell things that I believe in. I believe in this organization. I travel the world, literally the world, because we cannot get there fast enough because they want DeMolay. And why do they want it? Because they know, these countries know, that there's something missing that their boys need. These boys need us everywhere. They need something good. They need 4-H, they need Little League, they need all of these different organizations. They also need DeMolay. And for us, we have a synergy between the Masonic lodges, the Grand Lodges, the concordant bodies, Shrine, the Imperial Potentate this year, Shrine, Chris Smith, is a senior DeMolay. He has gone on record saying that he owes much of his success in life to being a DeMolay. The Grand Master of Grand Encampment, Dwayne Vaught, is a senior DeMolay. He has said similar things, put it in writing, which is even better. And he sent it out to us, so which we have sent to all of our members. We wait long enough, we see these young men wind up making a decision in life that comes back. And the decisions somehow all come back to things that are similar to what we find in these documents, which is trust, stand by your friend, help your friend, and be there for him or her if need be. It is a great honor to be the Grand Master of this organization. It is a one-year term, and during this 1 year, we have continued to touch every corner of this planet. We have Armenia, Azerbaijan, Gabon, Baja, California. They came to see us to start DeMolay, and we're going to be going there. So you say, hey, you speak Spanish? No. Do you speak Italian? The Italian I speak can't be used in public. Do you speak Portuguese? I don't speak any of those things. I really don't. So they have translators that are there. But when we go to these countries, how do you start DeMolay? Because the ones who do the DeMolay ceremonies are DeMolay boys. There are no DeMolays there. When you're the first ones on the ground, there are none. So what we do is I do all the ceremonies. I do every part. And then we Skype in a DeMolay chapter from the United States that does the drama. And as I'm doing the part, somebody's translating for me. And then I give them their obligations at the altar. And then the DeMolays, they take it from there. And then they move on, and they grow, and they grow, and they grow. The largest jurisdiction in America right now, as of this year, Paraguay. Paraguay. Bolivia is coming in close second. New York State came in third, which is not bad. But in these other countries, Brazil, they take them in very, very quickly. Brazil, different.
I thought Brazil would be number one.
Say again?
I thought Brazil would be number one.
Brazil is number one in one factor, but they have 2 Supreme Councils in Brazil. And there's some issues that are going on there that they want me to get involved in. And to be blunt, I told them that if they want to hide behind if they want to take their egos and hide behind young men, don't bother talking to me. And I said, translate that into Portuguese. And they said, they're just stunned. And so now they're talking about unification. So we volunteered to host them here in New York at this building to have a meeting to figure out why there's 2 and why they can't be 1. Because the kids don't know, boys don't know. What do they know? They know what the adults tell them to join. And what we want to do is make sure they get the DeMolay experience that is proper. But Brazil's growing, Paraguay's growing, Bolivia's growing, New York State is growing. This year, we are in a spurt where we see tremendous growth in areas that we didn't see before. Now let's be honest, Masonry is right-sizing in many cases. And as it right-sizes, DeMolay right-sizes with it, because your support is congruent to whatever Masonry does. But DeMolay on a whole is doing a good job, because when they're 21, they're done. They are out. There's no waving of wands, there's no, let me write the thing and extend this boy another year. Can't be done. 21, they're done. So what happens is we lose thousands of boys that turn 21 every year. Thousands. We need to replenish that every year. And we replenish them in the numbers of like 15 and 20,000 at a clip. And that's a big nut to crack when you're trying to keep an organization alive. An organization that has a life membership fee in America, by the way. Listen to this. You ready? $35 lifetime. People say, how do you do that? Well, that's hard. The way we do it is we do it with donation, fundraising. We have people who go out and they collect tabs of cans, and the boys learn how to raise some money. But a boy joins DeMolay in the United States for $35 once, and that's it for his lifetime fee. There was a time when we thought we were going to change it to a yearly dues and all of that, but we elected not to. So we have smart investors that try and keep our numbers afloat. And I'm not an accountant, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a doctor. I go to those three individuals anytime I have a question. They know what they're doing, and they know how to keep it going. They keep it together. So DeMolay, it continues to work hard to take what we emulate from the last Grand Master to what we have today. Now let me tell you another interesting thing. I was at a lecture of a man named Scott Walter. Scott Walter has a, I think, History Channel show called America on Earth, or something similar to that. And he also has a book out that he and his wife have worked on called The Hooked X. And the Hooked X is a little, it's just what it is, an X with a little hook on the bottom of it. And he's a forensic geologist. And what he was is he was called into the Pentagon when during 9/11 to analyze the concrete and analyze what caused, what was in the incendiaries that caused the explosion. And what he does is he found a stone in Minnesota that was supposedly calculated to a certain year. He has calculated it to be far prior to that. And he does it by traveling the world and scraping off pieces of tombstones and analyzing them. And he feels that there is a Grand Master of the Templars today that it still exists. And he feels that there's an order that just hasn't become public yet. That's still out there. It's an interesting theory. It's an interesting opportunity to listen to. I'd be more than happy to welcome into the DeMolay world, because we can always use good advisors. But he has an interesting theory about that. I am not a historian. I can only go by the things that I hear, I read, and I trust. And the things that I trust are the things that are in the Chinon parchment, based on what came out by the Vatican and what came out in the Scottish Rite reenactment that was done, and based on what we know about DeMolay itself, and based on the history of what I've seen, the good that it does. So I'm thrilled to be here. I always told my mother I could talk about these things in a phone booth or a stadium, and when I say that to the kids today, they say, "What's a phone booth?" So God bless each and every one of you for what you do for our fraternity and our society. God bless the purposes of DeMolay, and God bless the United States of America. Thank you for having me.